Good evening and welcome to the regular session of Findlay City Council. Today's date is August 15th, 2023, and it is 6 o'clock. We will start this evening's meeting with the roll call, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance, and then a moment of silence.
Mr. Ballman?
Here.
Ms. Frischi?
Here.
Mr. Greeno?
Here.
Mr. Hellman?
Here.
Mr. Niemeyer?
Here.
Mr. Palmer?
Here.
Mr. Russell?
Here.
Mr. Slough?
Here.
Ms. Warnicki?
Here.
Mr. Wopser?
Present.
Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I will accept a motion to accept the previous minutes from our public hearings and city council. Ms. Frischi.
So moved.
Second, Mr. Palmer. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Any opposed, nay. They are accepted. Mr. Russell, do we have any add-ons, replacements, or removals from tonight's agenda?
Yes, sir. We have an add-on letter from Fire Chief Eberly concerning Public Utilities Commission of Ohio's Hazmat Training Grant Awards, and would add that to the reports of municipal officers and municipal departments. And we have corresponding legislation 2023- 82. Thank you. And corresponding legislation for the Hazmat Training Grant Award, and add that to the agenda or legislation section and move for both of those.
Ms. Frischi.
It's 082 or is it 0814?
8-2, and I will correct the minutes.
Thank you. So moved. That.
Please make that. I'm saying.
I'll make the motion to accept.
Okay. Second, Mr. Palmer. Discussion? Hearing none. All those of adding the items discussed, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. They are added to tonight's agenda. We have no proclamations. We have no recognition or retirement resolutions. We do have one petition.
A zoning amendment request for 315 Walnut Street from Commander David Rhodes with the VFW Post 5645 to change the zoning to C1 local commercial. It's currently zoned R3 small lot residential.
All right, this will be referred to the City Planning Commission and the Planning and Zone Committee. This evening we have several oral communication requests. 2, 3, 4. We have 5 that seem to be in opposing the recreation area, and we have 1 that is in favor of it. Normal city council rules only allow 3 to each side. Since there are 5, I need city council's approval to let everybody speak. Mr. Russell.
So moved.
Second, Mr. Hellman. Any discussion? Hearing none, we will allow all 5 to speak this evening. Just want to remind everybody there's a 4-minute time limit. At about 3 minutes and 50 seconds, I'll raise my hand or throw something at you or something to that effect. Understand that that does not include the question and answer periods that the council can ask you at any time, and they can also extend your time. So if you haven't finished up and I had to gavel you to stop, they have that option. They have the option not to let you continue though either. So, but it's up to them. So this evening we're going to start as they were turned in to me. So we're going to start with Linda Bishop. And Linda, come to the mic. Make sure that the little red button's pushed and the light turns on. And tell everybody your name, your address, and why you're here tonight.
Okay, I see it. Okay. First of all, I'm going to read from the paper and then ask some questions of you. Findlay City Council first step toward the construction of a proposed recreation area downtown could come Tuesday. Legislation to authorize city administrators to enter into a contract with Strand and Associates Incorporated Columbus is up for its third reading and a vote by council. The contract is for $1.5 million. Should the project move forward, engineering fees for the full design are expected to be about $4 million. Early estimates put the cost of the park somewhere between $10 million and $40 million. A price tag of about $30 million was discussed most recently. Findlay's investment is expected to be about $10 million, with grants and donations making up the balance. So I have some questions that I'm hoping you'll be able to answer. First of all, why would we not, if we're going to be doing this project, why would we not be using a more local company? Why would we get somebody from like from the Columbus area? Because if we used a more local company, wouldn't that money stay in Findlay then? So I don't know. Does anybody have an answer for that question? Okay.
Mr. Hellman?
I could give it a shot, and maybe the mayor or the administrator would prefer to answer it, but a lot of times when you go out of town for architectural, any kind of services like that, you're looking for expertise and experience, people that have done this before on a statewide basis or a national-wide basis and are very accomplished in specific design, like in this case, for a park of this nature. So I am assuming that that's the reason that they did it.
Okay, and I don't know who did the design of the park that we have in downtown Findlay at Riverside. I have no idea. Okay. The other question, what grants are you receiving? Because you say you're going to be receiving grants. What are the grants that are going to be received?
Mayor?
That is to be determined. A lot of grants across the state. There are state capital programs, there are community improvement programs specific for, excuse me, for park development, downtown development. Those have not specific, we know a broad range of the ones that are out there, but until you have a design nailed down to more specifically, then you're able to go out and seek specific grant
Okay.
funds.
So are they all going to be state grants then?
I can't, there might be a private entity, there might be a state, there might be federal.
Okay. Where and who are the donations coming from? Because it mentions that in the paper too.
Mayor?
No specific donations have been solicited at this time, given that we don't have a design. That's why we'd like to move forward in the process.
Okay. It seems that Findlay is only concerned about how the downtown looks, but they don't really care about we the people and what that does to the people who support all of these projects. And that's what I'm concerned about. $10 million is quoted that's going to be our share. That's still quite a burden on the people of Findlay, in my opinion. And the reason I say that is that I am a landlord, and so I do have people who live in my rental properties, and they're having a really tough time in this economy paying for their rent, their food, their car. I just had a lady who had a car that broke down, and she said it's beyond repair. She had to get a whole new car. So, you know, when she's hurting, then I'm hurting. Okay, the other thing I wanted to point out is that our town last summer, we had to, I think it was last summer, maybe it was 2 years ago, the high hazard dam that's on the south side of town, the city of Findlay has, okay, I'll wrap it up. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Next is Patty Klein, 733 Terra Oaks.
Oh, question.
Mr. Niemeyer. Did you want to continue?
Yeah, do you need a second to that motion? I was just about done anyway. I only had a couple.
I have a motion. Second, Ms. Frishy. All those in favor of allowing her to continue, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. Go ahead, Linda.
Thank you. The other thing that comes to mind too is that all this printing of money that we've seen the Washington politicians do just causes inflation for all of us and makes everything cost more. And I see this happening more and more every day, even in the city of Findlay. So I'm very concerned about that because at some point in time, this whole thing is going to come crashing down like a house of cards. And that's all I have to say, and thank you very much.
Mr. Russell, hang on, Linda. Somebody might have a question for you.
No, it's been, I've been receiving texts that the streaming is not working and suggest a 5-minute pause so we can get technology working.
There you go, Linda. You broke it.
And I'm not doing it
No,
again.
I'm just. With that in mind, we can do a couple things. Oh, he's saying we are live again. As soon as you sat down. Okay.
I will just note, though it wasn't streaming, we were still recording. So though the public couldn't see your full statement, when we upload it tonight, your portion will be a part of it as well.
Okay. All right. Good. All right. Back on track here. So our second tonight is Patty Klein, 733 Terra Oaks, and she'd also like to speak to the downtown recreation area.
This should be short and sweet. Mayor Byrne, Council, thank you for the opportunity to speak at this meeting on important changes to our community. I'm here to oppose the passing of the current plan for the downtown recreation area. We all want nice things. Given the choice, many people would buy a Mercedes if money was no object. The current plan for this park is a Mercedes. The city has not presented any plan for a park with a reasonable budget. I do not oppose having a nice park for the community. However, we don't need the kind of park that you find in St. Louis or Chicago. Please vote no on proceeding with the current park plan. Use our money on our current parks that we can all enjoy the outdoors without a future tax burden or dependence on outside resources. Say no to the Mercedes. Let's take a look at a Chevy or a Ford. Thank you.
Mr. Wobser.
Patty, thank you for the comments. So you're in favor of something there,
I'm in.
a Chevy.
Sure.
You're
Sure.
in favor of a Chevy of a park, correct?
Sure. Maybe a used Chevy. No. My plan for that area at this point, if I was in your shoes, would be to make it look nice, cut the grass, the houses that were removed over on Main Cross along the park there. The grass is cut, and there's nothing there right now. Maybe they could put something there later within a budget. But right now, I just think the economy is unpredictable. To propose such a huge, legendary plan for that area right now, I just don't think it's the right time. And I think that we have nice parks, and I think people would appreciate their local neighborhood parks be updated and given some things. I know my son, he's graduated now, but he would have loved to have some batting cages over at Riverside or something, and there's probably insurance and stuff that prevents that. But anyways, there's things I think they can do with the parks we have now, and I just don't understand why this huge, legendary park has been such a priority at this time when our economy is not that great.
Would you agree that we need to study the process a little bit more?
I think that maybe the community could be presented with options instead of just one big, huge,
Very good.
money's, no object plan. So,
Thank you.
Other questions? Thank you, Patty.
yep.
Next is Wanda Fruth, 309 Warrington Avenue in Findlay, and she'd also like to speak to the recreation park.
I'm speaking for someone else tonight. Is that on? Yes. Okay. Actually, and I'll give you her name first. This is her letter, and it's Katie Erickson, and she lives at 1025 West Sandusky Street. I live on Warrington Avenue. I've known Katie for a long time, so please bear with me. This is her letter. Hello, I have been a resident of Findlay since 2007. I've been here since 2006. And I am reaching out to encourage you to not proceed with the large park project north of the river in downtown Findlay without letting the citizens vote on it. While I am in favor of parks in general, $10 million is a lot of taxpayer money for one giant park when there are so many issues in our city that need to be addressed. For that price tag, I believe the citizens should have the opportunity to vote on it so everyone's voice can be heard, not just the few who do take the time to learn about what's going on and share their thoughts. On June 28th, the mayor's Facebook page posted about this downtown recreation area, and that was in the paper. I left a comment on that post, and Katie left a comment on that post asking 3 questions. 1, where is the money coming from for this park? 2, does the city already own all the properties that this would affect? 3, will the general population have an opportunity to vote on this, not just provide comments, but an actual issue on a ballot? If so, when? If not, why? The response I received from the mayor was that I should review the proposal, which I had already read twice, and that there will most likely be various rounds of community input as the design is refined, which implies that this project is moving forward no matter what, though some of the details may change. My reply on Facebook was, I read through that document a second time, and I am still unable to find those specific answers, hence why I asked the question in the first place. Number 1, all I can find on the funding is that page 12 says simply appropriate the funds. Does that mean appropriate or appropriate? Appropriate or appropriate funds, the funds. What does that mean? Number 2, this is a yes, no question, which I would think someone close to the project could easily answer. She might be referring to the number 1. Number 3, if many people speak up and say they don't want this project to be done, is that still an option? Or are you moving ahead regardless and only changing details based on the public's feedback? And that's a quote. This is her letter continuing. I never received an additional response. While the city wants to create the illusion of listening to the constituents, I do not feel that this is happening in this scenario. I'm sorry, I'll go as quickly as I can.
I move that she be granted more time to finish the letter. It's almost
Second,
over.
Mr. Niemeyer. All those in favor say aye. Any opposed, nay. Okay, thank you. Wrap it up then.
Thank you. I do not feel this is happening in this scenario, as my questions were basically ignored. Findlay has larger issues that need to be addressed, primarily a wage problem. The city is bringing in a lot of warehouse jobs, but nothing in the higher pay levels. This results in an economy that is skewed to the lower income levels and a housing market where people are struggling to pay the rent. There is an incorrect mentality surrounding Findlay that rents are too high, even though actually data shows that we're below average rent for the state. The real problem is that there are not enough high-paying jobs. Due to this issue, there is also a strong problem with the homelessness, crime, and drug abuse in our community, which is often related to mental health issues. While I suppose this fancy new park would provide more benches for the homeless population to sleep on and more areas for the drug transactions, I do not feel that spending millions of dollars on a park is the way to solve these issues. I am unfortunately not able to attend the city council meeting this evening in person, or else I would share these comments there. But I wanted to be sure to send this email to let you know my thoughts. I moved to Findlay as a young adult and have enjoyed its small town charm, but it is sad to see what is happening to this once lovely city as the real problems are not being addressed. Thank you for reading this, and I read it for Katie Erickson, 1025 West Sandusky Street, and thank you for your time and attention.
Questions or comments? Ms. Frischie?
Wanda, the three questions you were mentioned that you said that she did not get an answer to is where is the money coming from? I think that's an unknown where the mayor talks about we don't know where the grants are coming from or what the dollar amounts are. I just flipped open my capital budget book and we haven't even appropriated anything into our 5-year capital other than it looks like $100,000, well, 100,000 plus. But so we don't know. Those numbers are unknown. Do we own all the properties? Not yet, but we are working on that still. And then the general population vote, I think that's an interesting comment, but I don't believe that's anything that we're doing at this time.
Any other questions?
Thank you, Wanda.
Thank you.
Okay, next will be Randy, and I want Odermont, who lives at 724 6th Street, and he would also like to speak down to the downtown North River Development Project.
Hello, my name is Randy Odermont. I live at 724 6th Street. I'm also a candidate for the 4th Ward Council this fall, and Katie Erickson is actually part of my committee. Being the person who, I guess, handed in their sheet later than everybody else, they pretty much said everything I was going to say on a very short speech. But I think that one of the things that I wanted to stress that has been pointed out, and that is we're moving forward with a lot of expenditure without actually, I think, getting much public input on it. I know I hear a lot of talk about getting public input, or listening to the public. The people that I've talked to are not real keen on this idea of spending $4 million just to design a park and then not knowing how much more it's going to cost after that. I can tell you, though, that if somebody's going to come up with a $4 million design, it's going to be a multi-million dollar park, or else it's not going to look like it was worth the expenditure. So I guess, I'm going to have to put some trust in some people at this point that you people have a lot more knowledge about this than I do, as far as where this money's coming from, how long it's going to take to get it going, how quickly we're going to need to spend this money. I look at it as kind of like a house remodeling project. You don't necessarily jump in and do it all at once and say, okay, well, I got a project that's going to cost $100,000. Here's my $100,000. It can be done in stages, and I think that we do need to maybe get a little bit more input about this, because we talk a lot about doing what the public, getting input from the public and serving the public. Well, I kind of saw at the last meeting, we had a whole room full of people in here that were opposed to a project that got passed anyway. So I think that you're leaving some black eyes out there, and I'm hearing a lot about it going around and talking to people that maybe, there's not the support, for this stuff that you think there is. So, and I don't necessarily think that we need to have a vote on it, but I think that maybe before you decide you're going to spend $4 million, and if you're going to appropriate 1.5 of that tonight, you're kind of jumping in with both feet, and it might be hard to get back out once you've done that. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Melissa Humphreys, and she'd like to also speak about the park.
Gotta get my glasses on. This actually came from my sister in Phoenix, and I was just out there myself. My concern about this park is I've been in Phoenix. I've seen some of the most beautiful parks. They don't have a lot of stuff. They're just beautiful parks where people can go, but it's riddled with the homeless. It's riddled with needles. It's riddled with murders happening on a daily basis. But they're beautiful parks. I think that that was from me. This is from Renee LaGuire, my sister at 148 Larkins. Her son-in-law is a salesman for Musco Lighting, and I don't know if you're familiar with Musco Lighting, but Musco Lighting is, actually we have Musco Lighting out at the Cube, but he's in Nevada and Arizona, cities all across it. He said that a $40 million project for a park should be like a Taj Mahal. He is shocked that the price tag for such a small park is $40 million. He asked if we put it out for bid. I'm asking, why do we not maintain the parks we already have? The fields at the Cube are very nice, but the area for spectators is extremely dangerous. Pavers, steps that are loose and wobbly, no shade, dugouts without electricity, netting with holes and nut placed well to intercept pop-up foul balls. Can we please table this for now and fix what we already have? Put in a splash pad at Riverside Park on both the east and west side. Let's take time to rethink this. This is not what working class of Findlay wants. We have beautiful parks. Let's maintain and improve the parks we already have. This is a frivolous waste of taxpayers' money, just like the bump outs, islands, and bike path down Blanchard Street. Please vote against this or at least ask to table it. Thank you. You can still reach out to me if you have any questions. That would be Renee LaGuire, and you can reach her when she gets back from Phoenix, or call her. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you, Melissa.
Anybody else? Do I turn this off?
Oh, no, we got one more.
Okay.
Okay, so Tom Schindeldecker, anybody doesn't know who Tom is, he was a former councilman. He would also like to speak about the riverfront recreation.
My name might be mud for some of these people in the audience by the time I'm through. If I've done my math correctly, it said 4 minutes, there were 5 speakers. That's 20 minutes. Do I get 20 minutes? All right. I am speaking in favor of this project. I've been in favor of it long before we even talked about it. When those buildings came down on the north side of the river, I figured this is what we really needed to do. This is, in my opinion, is the most important project this council can undertake. I think it is vital. Yes, it's a lot of money, but I think it's worth it. I think it absolutely is worth it. I have a couple of suggestions. I think we should go slow in developing it, add on as needed. First, my priorities would be an amphitheater, food truck accommodations, a playground, fencing along the riverbank because there will be kids in a playground with some shrubbery and so forth covering up the fencing, and some healthy amenities like the hiking path that I think is included in this. People have said to me, why do we need this? We've got the Marathon Center, we've got the Riverside Park and so forth. I can not imagine all the possible things that could take place in this park. I would start with Oktoberfest, the Rib-Off, car shows, the 4th of July and Veterans Day Parade aftermath, an art show, community and church and so forth, picnics, a farmer's market, outdoor concerts. Riverside would not be affected as far as I am concerned. Receptions, honoring sports teams that do well at the state level and so forth. Political speakers and rallies. Homecoming for the University of Findlay schools and so forth. And one that really intrigues me, Christmas markets. Any of you who have been overseas, particularly in Germany or France or something like that around the Christmas season, there have been Christmas markets for decades. It's a place where you can get something to eat, you can buy small trinkets for your Christmas gifts, you have entertainment, you have an opportunity to talk with your friends. They are beautiful, they are well attended. As a matter of fact, cruise lines often will schedule Christmas market tours of some of these. Wouldn't that be great? We already have a tradition of buying Christmas trees on that property. There are these, and I'm sure you can think of dozens more activities that could take place. People have talked about being critical about the parking problem. I don't think it really exists. Let's face it, folks, we're spoiled. We'll drive around the block 3 or 4 times trying to find a parking place from directly in front of the store or the location we want to go to. People downtown would not go across the river for parking, as some have suggested. We need more parking, that's what it ought to be. They won't do that. I wouldn't do that. But those people who are downtown would walk across the bridge to go to a concert or some other event. The parking problem, I think, is almost non-existent. Think of some of the items that I talked about. Oktoberfest, I'm familiar with that. I've been on the board of the Historical Museum for several years, no longer. When they set up for that, and they used to set up for the Rib-Off and some of the other activities that have been downtown, the setting up is more more congested and causes more problems than the actual event. The events will take place in the evening, but beginning about noon or maybe even earlier than that, streets are blocked off while tables are brought in, stages are set up, and so forth. So I don't think that is a great problem. I think this is a vital problem for the community. I would like to make one more comment, if I may. It's been said that perception is reality. And the perception of a project such as this on the community, I think, is outstanding. Picture this, if you would. Somebody coming up 68 from Kentucky and deciding, I don't want to go on the interstate, and making a leisurely trip through Findlay. What do they see? Starting at the south end, they see several beautiful churches.
Second, Mr. Ballman. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Sorry, Tom. Fair for one, fair for all.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I promise I'll wrap up quickly, and I'll have a weather report at the end of my report as well. Picture coming up, unfamiliar with this community and coming in from the south end or the north end or from 224 or any of the other places. What are you going to see as you come off 15 at South Main Street? You're going to see new housing developments at all levels. You're going to see 3 or 4 magnificent churches. You're going to see a hospital that is second to none for a community our size. And then there are those absolutely gorgeous South Main Street homes. You come out of that and you're right on the edge of downtown. And you've got storefronts that are occupied. You have people on the streets. You have the Marathon property. You have 2 downtown hotels. How many cities our size have even one? And then you cross the bridge, and all of a sudden there's an eyesore. And get beyond that, you've got several blocks of average commercial and housing projects. And then you come across the University of Findlay, and you keep going up. You go by the Cube, and you see all of these businesses. Can you imagine what people would think that made this trip? I mention this only because in the spring of 1966, my wife and I drove 400 miles to Findlay for a job interview. And we came down the turnpike. We went to Fremont, down to Fostoria. We came in Fostoria Avenue, which is nice, but it's not breathtaking. We hadn't gone about half a mile, and we thought, this feels like home. And we've been here ever since. I just think this is a vital project. I think we need to get started now, so pass this legislation. Let's get her done.
Questions for or comments to Tom? Thanks, Tom. Good to see you again.
There's a storm front.
Thank you. What is the humidity level right now there, Tom?
I'm sweating. I don't know about you.
Yeah. All right. Oh, be careful. You all right? All right. All right. Thank you, everybody, for your comments and questions this evening. We're going to move on to written communications.
An email from Willard Cam regarding water bill, and also an email from Don Emmert regarding Stop the Variance 300 block of West McPherson.
Questions or comments? Letters to be filed. Reports of officers and departments.
Officer Shareholders Disclosure Form from the Ohio Department of Commerce Division of Liquor Control for 10 Start Enterprises Incorporating, doing business as Scramblers at 516 South Main Street for D2, D3, D6 liquor permits. Chief Mathias was unable to provide a background check because names and social security numbers were not provided for this one.
Mr. Slough?
I would move no objection be filed.
Second, Mr. Wobser. Discussion? Oh, I'm sorry. Second, Ms. Frishy. Discussion? I'm still looking for a second. Second, Mr. Russell. Discussion. Mr. Wobser.
Thank you. I haven't seen anything like this since I've been on council. I suspect we've run into this before, but it looks to me like we've got two choices here, at least what was written by the Department of Commerce on the back of this. Notify the division whether you object and want a hearing, or ask for more time so that they can get the additional information they need. I don't think this is up for approval, the way I read this.
What we're doing here is deciding whether we're going to file an objection or not. Ms. Frishy.
So that was kind of my question. But I know from Don in the past that we can file an objection, but it really doesn't get us anywhere in having to go down there. But what do you do with a corporation that we're not tying it directly to an employee? How do they normally handle that, Don, when you don't have an individual?
When you can do it with an individual or in a class of people. We did not get one last year, and we didn't act on it. And now it's the same one, appears to be the same one, and they did not supply the information that we would really like to have.
So this is just a renewal, and I don't remember ever seeing that this was the red line before. And I'm sure Scramblers is not an issue, but I guess do we do the check for our benefit, or is it a requirement that we do the check with social security numbers?
It's not a requirement. It's something that we suggest they do, and to get to the information and of who is going in where.
And what's the risk of not having it?
Well, the risk is you may have some people that aren't doing selling alcohol for some other reason.
Mr. Hellman?
This caused a little consternation for me as well. Haven't we approved these when the information has been provided?
Always.
Always. Every time.
That's what I thought. Thank you. And I guess, would we not then continue with that? And if they don't provide the information, not approve it?
Council decision.
Thank you.
Mr. Russell?
I think on my time on council, we have approved all except for maybe this one from Scramblers last year. In conversations during that time, we had discussion about what happens if we do not recommend approval. And in essence, the Ohio Liquor Board takes that into account and apparently grants the permit anyway. And so it was kind of like, what is this, what is this step for? And it's a valid question. But and Don, so was it Scramblers last year? Was it the same one?
Correct.
Okay, yeah, because I remember that we did have it.
Mr. Wobser?
So, Don, they did not get a liquor license last time when we denied it, or when we voted not in favor for it, correct?
I believe they did not.
Right. So they're back asking one more time for the exact same thing,
the
'cause
same
they're not
thing.
selling alcohol there now. So I would have expected, had they gotten the license, they would have. So, okay, thank you.
Ms. Frishy?
This form, this process, is this us? Is this from us, from the city? This is from the state? So, have we tried to reach out to them? Or that's not our job as the city to reach out to them?
Mayor?
To my knowledge, we have not reached out to them. What I would recommend is that this be tabled. We can follow up. I wasn't aware of this issue until I got the packet on Friday, so we have not had an opportunity to discuss this further with the chief and determine if we want to try to reach out to the business. But I think it's a good practice for us to continue to have a specific individual that is responsible for maintaining and responsibility of the liquor license that we would be able to vet.
Mr. Russell?
Move the table.
Second, Mr. Greeno. All those in favor of tabling, I guess, this issue, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. It will
Nay.
be tabled. Oh, sorry, one nay. Okay, thank you.
Mr. President,
Yeah, Ms. Niemeyer.
isn't this, well, I talked to an attorney about this. It's a Trex type license, and it's in my ward. So that means it comes from out of town because there's none available in City of Findlay or Hancock County. But this would be no different than a corporation like Kroger, am I not right?
I think what the mayor's saying is that needs some further investigation, and I don't know. I'm not sure if you know, Don?
It's just to get the information and for the application, and there's no reason to deny it except for not having the information. And I've only in all my years gone down to the liquor board and defended us one time, and that's it. But if you supply the information, you're gonna, and there's a permit available, you'll most likely get the permit. So,
Ms. Frishy?
I guess I would like to hear more from Jim. What does a Trex mean, or what did the attorney tell you? Is that because we don't get anything from Kroger's or the beverage barn or anybody like that on an annual basis with an individual, right? So is that what you're trying to say, that the attorney told you some? I'm just curious.
They're just applying for a liquor license, just basically to keep up with competition, and there were none available. But I'm just stating that, I mean, there's no Kroger's, there's no Myers, there's no big corporations that actually change hands. And this is the same thing. I'm not exactly sure how many Scramblers in the state of Ohio. There's a number of them. So it's still, a corporation doing the same thing. There's one in Findlay. So now they would like to have a liquor license in Findlay just to compete with competition. There are other Scramblers in different cities in the state which have liquor licenses. And I just wanted to say, what's the difference? I mean, if we'd actually look or ask the state of Ohio, I don't think you're gonna have any one social security number for both Kroger's in town or Myers or 2 Walmarts. I could be wrong, but I don't think I am.
Mr. Palmer?
What about chain restaurants like an Applebee's or whatever? Do they have a single person on that we do a background check on, or do they have something similar to this?
Ms. Mayor.
I'm not sure. I think that's why I requested it be tabled so that we can follow up and just get more clarity. I don't think that there's, we obviously want scramblers to be able to have a successful business. I don't think anybody has concerns with that. I think we just want to better understand where the accountability in our community lies.
Okay, next.
Did we vote on the motion?
Oh, yeah, yes. It was approved. Right, we
Vote.
we did vote, yeah.
Oh, we didn't vote.
Well, there was no discussion during the vote, yeah. So, for Denise's sake, all those in favor
Vote
of
to table. You're correct.
tabling, say aye. Any opposed, nay?
It was only Nima.
Yeah, there you go.
You are
Right,
correct.
she's got it.
Shoosh.
Okay, thank you.
Officer Shareholders Disclosure Form from the Ohio Department of Commerce Division of Liquor Control for NNDBHUJ LLC doing business as Cigars and Stuff located at 710 South Main Street, or South Blanchard Street for C1 and C2 liquor permit. A check of the records show no criminal record for those who applied.
Mr. Palmer.
Move that no objection be filed.
Second, Mr. Slough. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor that no objection be filed, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. We will not file an objection.
City Planning Commission agenda for August 10th, 2023, as well as a staff report for August 10th, 2023, and the minutes of July 13th, 2023.
Questions or comments? Agenda, report, and minutes will be filed.
City Income Tax Monthly Collections Report for July 2023.
Questions or comments? Report to be filed.
Findlay Fire Department Activities Report for July 2023.
Questions or comments? Report to be filed.
Findlay Police Department Activities Report for July 2023.
Questions or comments? Report to be filed.
Treasurer Reconciliation Reports for May 31st, 2023, June 30th, 2023, and July 31st, 2023.
Questions or comments? Reports to be filed.
A letter from City Engineer Kalb regarding Han Blanchard Lincoln Path, project number 3287600.
Questions or comments? Letter to be filed.
Letter from City Engineer Kalb regarding Han Bigelow Avenue resurfacing fiscal year 24, PID 117611, number 3283380.
Mr. Russell.
Jeremy, to confirm, that's going to be Bigelow and Broad.
Yeah. So, I mean, part of that is officially Broad, but for the project of that, we called it Bigelow. But yeah, and then the following year, you'll be seeing where we're going to go from Melrose on the Broad there down to Trenton Avenue. So this is kind of another multi-phase.
Considering that the layout of that road is a 2-2, similar to Blanchard, do you look at that as an opportunity to do a Blanchard-type treatment with the center turns? And I don't know if the traffic would support it, but in adding the bike lanes on the side, and would that also open up potential state funding, whatever the alternative, the TAP funding for it?
Mr. Kelb.
So that can be considered. With the transportation alternative plan funding type thing, they're already out to fiscal year 27. But there are safety funds that could be used for that. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that is starting to come out with that kind of stuff. Safe Streets for All, and there's some others. So if that is wanting to be entertained down through there, could be something that could be studied to see the effects like the previous letter of the Blanchard and Lincoln.
Other questions or comments? Letter to be filed.
Letter from City Engineer Kalb regarding Ohio Public Works Commission grant application, Moracle Boulevard waterline replacement.
Questions or comments? Ms. Frishy.
Jeremy, was this part of our capital plan for 23 for Moracle?
Yeah, originally it was the water line that we are doing from Logan to Bio was originally this project, but we seen an immediate water quality issue that's why we changed it up. I had a letter a couple months ago about that, but Moracle was our original plan, and just things got shifted. So it was in 23, but we just pushed it back a year.
And then it was OPWC funds, do we apply for more than one thing a year for OPWC, or are we limited to how many applications we can do?
We will, depending on how much funding comes in from other communities, such as like Macomb and stuff like that. If I hear that there's funding that I can get 2 projects, I'll submit 2. We always submit at least 1 project, but it all depends on how much grant funds are out there and the match and all that kind of stuff. So right now, the Moracle water line we were wanting to do this. This fits. This is going to score good. So that's why we are putting it through the OPWC process.
And under the original plan before it got moved, was it a 12-inch line being upgraded to, or was it staying the 6?
No, it was going to be 12-inch.
Okay, and then only reason I asked about the OPWC, I think there was a project that we applied for OPWC that I saw in the Capitol. I can't remember what it was. There was an ordinance on it to go out for bid in the end of 22.
Yeah, there's a couple. I mean,
so that doesn't interfere.
They don't really have too much of a timeline, so they can carry over from year to year. Because like this grant funding, I actually, if this is accepted, won't get the grant funds until July of 24. So there's kind of a fiscal year difference since it's state funding.
And would this be a benefit to the potential project site for Habitat out there? Would that help with infrastructure out there as well, or no?
It will help with that project, but that's not the main goal of this project. That whole area out there, West Park, is needing water pressure, water quality, and water flow through there. Because this 6-inch line is pretty much kind of a main feed through there. So stretching this down from one 12-inch down to another 12-inch on Lima Avenue will improve that whole area.
Other questions or comments? Letter to be filed.
Letter from City Engineer Kalb regarding fiscal year 22 AFG grant award, project number 319-33100.
Questions or comments? Mr. Wobser.
Jeremy, in this, you're asking us to forego formal bidding process for this. And from the reason being that you want to use, is it Bear? Yeah, Bear unit, and because that it helps streamline your maintenance. Is that correct?
Yeah, so the waiving will be for breathing air systems.
Breathing air systems.
For the Bear unit. We already have a Bear unit right now, and they come out twice a year to service that. So having the same unit, they will be able to service both of them at the same time twice a year for both of those.
Are we confident that the savings that we'll gain on maintenance will outweigh the potential savings of bidding this out?
I can't say that for sure, what those savings would be. It is a unit that we have already that we're used to and that we have used. So it's not a new unit that they would have to be trained on or anything like that.
Understood.
So I can't tell you what the benefits of that would be, but as of our daily use, I could see benefit from that.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments? Letter to be filed.
A letter from City Engineer Kalb regarding Rawson and Swale restroom construction, CDBG, project number 319-33300.
Questions or comments? Letter to be filed.
Summary financial reports as of July 31st, 2023.
Questions or comments? Mr. Stashik.
Yes, for council's benefit, I had a conversation with Councilman Wobster regarding our mid-year review with everything going on, strategic planning and some other things that were happening. We've got to the point where we're pretty late in the process. We had discussed combining it with the pre-budget meeting as we did last year for not only that reason, but also we're now seeing a normalization of the income tax receipts from everything that happened with regard to the large corporate changes with Marathon Cooper over the last couple of years. And lastly, Mr. Harrington said he would like to have an audit review meeting for you folks of our CAFR. And our audit firm, our state contracted audit firm, would like to do that September 5th at 5 p.m. If you guys are interested in attending. What I'm going to ask you to do is please email me if you're interested in attending, because how the meeting is conducted would depend on how many of you are interested. So that's where we're at with that. So if there's any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Jim, would you repeat the time and date?
It's September 5th before your next meeting at 5 p.m., so it does conflict with the Strategic Planning Committee, but that date and time came from the audit firm.
So do you want to combine in the other portion of this, or is this just for your audit?
This would be
Review.
each year you are offered the opportunity to have an explanation of the management comments and any audit questions that you have. So the meeting in years past has gone from no one attending to 1 or 2 people attending, and it lasting 38 seconds to it lasting 45 minutes. So it just depends on how many of you want to go, and we would adjust how they do it accordingly to make it as efficient as possible.
And you'll schedule the pre-budget meeting for a later date?
Yes.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments? Letter to be filed.
Findlay Municipal Court Activities Report for July 2023.
Questions or comments? Report to be filed.
Letter from City Engineer Kalb regarding 4th Capital Improvement Appropriation of 2023.
Questions or comments? Letter to be filed.
Letter from City Engineer Kalb regarding Findlay Airport FAA grant AIP 35 and AIP, or 34 and AIP 35.
Questions or comments? Ms. Frischie.
So when I got my council packet on Friday and got to this page on here, I was a little upset, to say the least. And I think it's been the icing on the cake for me. I think we have a loss in process. It's been clear in the last several months that the Myrna administration lacks the respect of communicating with the community and council by going rogue and making decisions without following process. The examples I have, we first have the Park District, where we assumed property of Civitan Park without going through council, and now we're trying to wrestle through all that. But, you know, they drew up the documents, we had them signed, and we assumed property from the Park District that could have an EPA issue. Then recently, we also had the Myrna administration enter into an agreement with Findlay City Schools to use city employees to.
I'm sorry, but is this?
It is.
Does this have anything to do with the letter?
Yes, it does. I'd be glad to finish.
Okay, so let's get to the gist of the letter rather than being accusatory on other items.
I'm speaking as a council person, so I appreciate
Thank
finishing.
you. I'm just making sure that you
So
keep
we
on track.
recently had Findlay City Schools where we took city employees to do asphalt and concrete work, labor, and then we also entered into a contract with the bus garage for storage, and then we will be doing the demolition of that when they want that done, again without council approval and process. Tonight we have a letter from the Myrna administration saying, oops, we had people on vacation and we missed an email before the last council meeting. And this was for an FAA grants, which is great. We want to improve our airport. I'm not against that. But when I'm told in a letter that you went ahead and signed the contract without council approval yet again, I have to say, why do we have city council? If we have an administration that continues to do things without following process and other council members or the majority of council members allow for it, we are a rubber stamp. And tonight we're also going to see later in the council packet that $9,000 about regionalizing our water system. So today, this letter, Jeremy, of this oops, what should have happened is we should have had a council meeting. We should have called a special meeting and we should have followed process. And for that reason, I just can't vote for it because we have to put a stop to this process not being followed. So we have some serious discussion that the community needs to be aware of because there is a process and the process is for the people.
Mr. Kalb.
So I understand your comments, what you're saying on that. So to kind of clarify what is happening, so with the airport applications, you don't send in just a grant application for that. It's a pre-application that goes in. The FAA says, yep, this is a project we'll fund. No, it's a project that is not qualifying within that. So we have our airport consultants and engineers. they send those in pre-applications. Sometimes we get notifications that is, or once the funding's available, if it's there, they say, hey, here you go, here's our grant application. The FAA is a fast moving with that. They put on quick timelines for that. Sometimes we get the opportunity where we can have letters. I looked back at last year's letter for the North Apron project, and it was the same thing. We got it on a Friday or something like that, and it was like a quick turnaround. The benefit with that of last year's was that there was a council meeting that we could have got that squeezed on for. This one was not. We understand the process. We respect the process. We reached out to the FAA to say, hey, can we have this extended? We got to go through the council process. They said the way our funding works is you would have to drop your application and then reapply. It's a very competitive atmosphere out there, and they said you're probably not going to get funded again. Between the two projects, the number 34, that is the reimbursement for the alternates number 1 and 2 of the North Apron project. Why I felt comfortable with that one is because we have discussed it during the capital projects and budgets and all that kind of stuff. We said we were going to be getting that reimbursed. We had that part of last year's ordinance, but working with the auditor's office, they said just to make sure that, it's cleaned up on both ends on our, she talking with Ginger, she said, I understand that it's under that for, your last year's council letter, but to just make sure we have each AIP separate. Let's just have this in since we already have a letter. Number 35, AIP 35, that is the design work for the taxiway. That is in the capital plan and the budget for that. No, that has not been discussed outside of that, but that is just the design portion. So between both of those, for 34, our match money would be $10,540, and number 35 would be $14,900. I did not include any appropriation with this because this is strictly just allowing us to apply and also to accept this. The appropriation will be coming at another time. So if you guys look at this and say, we don't accept this, we don't want those grant funds, then we would not be utilizing those from the FAA. This is a normal practice with it, but I did not see with the 90% match funds that we normally get with FAA for our projects that we didn't want to put that in jeopardy to lose it, and it would be all capital funds.
Ms. Frischi?
Jeremy, I understand everything you're saying. I truly do. And I hope you understand where I'm coming from, that there is a process that has to be followed. And I say to you, next time, you call president of council and we schedule a meeting to make sure we dot our I's and we cross our T's properly. And that is, there are too many things happening with this administration that we cannot keep going this way. I agree with you. It's a yes thing that we should be doing, but there's a process to it. And that is where I am stuck, because council is not taken seriously when we say oops, or we say, oh, we're going to fix it later, like tonight with a third reading for Findlay City Schools. You didn't get permission, you got caught, so now we're going to ask for forgiveness. But we continued that whole time sending our city workers out to work. So there's a problem there. I understand where you're coming from. I appreciate it, and I hope you hear me saying, let's follow a process.
Mayor?
Councilwoman, I'm not, you know what? I think our team has done a great job of owning up when there have been process errors. The legislation before you tonight for the Findlay City Schools is completely unnecessary. Actually, I have great respect for City Council, and that's why I continue to bring legislation that technically we don't need your approval for, because I think it is important that we have discussion. But there are certain abilities that I don't lean on frequently that I do have as mayor of this city to enter into agreements and partnerships that I believe are in the best interest of our community to get things done. Now, we have conversations here frequently. We have committee meetings here frequently. I send out emails. We send out communication. And some things, yes, there was a process issue because, you know what? I didn't see the email from the FAA while I was sitting in the hospital. So you know what? I appreciate the issues, and we will address those. But you continually saying that we don't have respect for you guys and the work that we do is completely false and is inappropriate for you to try to convey to the community. Because I bet if we sat down and looked at every single item that we've accomplished in the past 5 years, that our margin of error is very low. So I appreciate what you're saying. I'm happy to have the conversation. All I want to say is that we're doing nothing wrong, and when we do make an error, we acknowledge it.
Mr. Webster.
Jeremy, I appreciate your comments. I guess the question I've got here, understand, I'm not going to vote against this. We need the money. It's unfortunate that it's gone this way. Have we looked at the process? My guess is on these applications, you put an email address on these applications, and that's where the response goes to. Are we looking at, in the future, where we put an email address that's more of a, let me back up and make this more of a general question. Have we figured out how to fix this next time around?
So I'll jump in if I may, Jeremy, because I know you can't see me behind. So typically you have to have certain designated emails. I think one thing that I really want to point out that we see a lot, and I think you guys, the majority of you acknowledge, that these grant timelines are not very considerate of community public process, right? When we get a grant timeline and it gives you a week and a half to get it done, sometimes we have to make a judgment call, right? Anytime we can, we're trying to be preemptive and get that approval. That's why we talk about the pre-applications. That's why we put the projects in the capital documents. That's why we try to kind of preempt you guys, so that in situations where, you know what, we weren't able to come and get the blessing ahead of time because of timing, and Councilwoman, I completely understand, yes, we could try to call a last minute meeting, but then you run into the public meeting notice timeframe and all of those different, is I think that is also just worth noting. So we will continually evaluate, but sometimes they change it. They may not even tell you what the timeline is going to be like. Sometimes they might notify you 2 days in advance. That is sometimes what happens. And so we do our best to adjust and make it work and make sure that all of the I's are dotted and T's are crossed and everybody's in the loop. And we do our best to make that happen, but sometimes it's just not possible. We have to make a judgment call and then take our lumps.
Mr. Webster.
The Mayor, point's well made. This came in, this email, according to the letter, Jeremy's letter, came in on a Friday. We had a meeting on that Tuesday, which so is the 28th. We had a meeting on the following Tuesday, so it was 2.5 business days. It was a tough turnaround time, but we had till the 8th to get it done. So the one thing I would agree with what Councilman Frischie is saying is that I think we could have tried to get a meeting together, or at least appropriations committee, to vet this really quick and get some approval through it. Nobody's going to vote against this, right? We know, I mean, it's a 95% match or something like that, right, Jeremy? At the end of the day, go ahead, something like that. I mean, just, so next time around, hopefully we'll take a look at this and figure out how we get that email to route in the right place. Thank you.
Mr. Calvin.
Quick comment, I won't keep beating on this, but so we've talked about this so going forwards, when we get into the pre-application portion of it, we're just going to start putting ordinances for the actual application. You might see more application type things, but we kind of want to, normal practice is we were waiting to know that it was a good project to go through. But to prevent that, we're going to be going through the pre-application. So, you guys might be asking more questions. What happened to this one? Why didn't we get this one? Because you might see multiple ordinances for that, but that should clean up a lot of that. In the email thing, it would just be, like the mayor was saying, they're starting to go to a lot of electronic secure, so it only goes to one person, and then all of a sudden once it's signed, then all of a sudden I see it type thing. So there's a lot of moving parts with that because of emails, but to help clean up in the future, because we do respect you guys and your guys' input on that, you'll be seeing a lot more for the pre-application process.
Any more questions or comments? Mr. Sheldon, I think the humidity just went up a little bit, so. Okay, move on.
Letter from Service Safety Director Martin regarding farmland leases.
Questions or comments? Mr. Webster.
Rob, is this the same property that we talked about last week?
No, the Carlin property, no.
It is not.
We excluded that on purpose, not knowing the outcome of that, but we have paperwork prepared that we can move that lease forward separately than this. We typically include them all, but we purposefully excluded that, not knowing the outcome of the conversation.
Okay, so you'll bring that to us at a later date?
Yes.
Pending further conversation. We don't have any legislation pending on the Carlin Street property, correct?
Correct.
Right. I mean, all we've had is initial conversation from Habitat last week or last meeting.
I will have enough time to be able to get legislation for
Okay.
that contract.
That was
if
my
that's-
question.
If we're going to choose to move forward with agriculture.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments? Letter be filed.
Letter from Mayor Mern regarding downtown recreation area.
Questions or comments? Mr. Stashak.
I have a couple quick comments, and I think they're better placed here than during your debate, should there be a motion to approve the legislation. I've been pretty consistent in my comments all along on this with regard to this contract. First off, investing $1 million when you know you don't have $30 million to do this seems inappropriate to me. However, if it's 10% of the contract price, and I've heard that more than once, then you're presuming the contract is going to be no less than $10 million, even if it's only a third of the design. I don't find that completely defensible at this moment, being we have no idea how you're going to pay for that. Second, it's clear there are environmental considerations with regard to this project. I want to thank the mayor. We've been working towards getting quotes, proposals to evaluate those environmental considerations. But for your benefit, even Anchor Park, across the river from this, which is included in the park design, was a junkyard. It's clear from the Sanborn insurance maps. There is a lot of environmental discussion to happen that was not included in any of the floodway river studies. And Mr. Wilson himself, when I mentioned that to him, said, I have nothing to do with that. I can't comment on that because it's not part of what we're doing. So you're going to have to explore that yourself. I feel very comfortable in the conversations I've had with some experts in environmental projects that I believe we have the cart before the horse. And as your fiscal officer, I, like everybody else, have no desire not to see that cleaned up, not to look, I want that to look nice. Every one of us does. Everybody here wants that to look nice. But my recommendation to you is that you consider pausing, not entering into this contract until you have clarity on the environmental components of this. And if that means tabling it until the mayor and I get a little bit more in depth with the responses that we're going to get based on the $100,000 you appropriated to have a good idea what it's going to cost you, it's wise to do. And that's my recommendation. Pause. It doesn't mean you're not going to do it, but it does mean you want to be prudent with a $1.3 million expenditure that likely will cause you to spend another $2.7 million in design. If that number holds, if nothing else, it'd be significantly more in design. And I think that makes sense. Nothing is lost, nothing is harmed, and you have answers that you did not have to get during phase one benching, but in this case, you need to have them because you own the properties and you own them now. That's my recommendation as your fiscal officer.
Mr. Hellman.
Mr. Stachek or the mayor or Mr. Harrington, didn't we have this discussion, a meeting or two ago, that there were environmental concerns and we were going to look into that?
Mayor?
Yes, so this has been an ongoing discussion. I know we've discussed it a number of times at the Appropriations Committee, as well as then in the council meetings of the whole. So yes, we are very much aware that there are environmental items that are going to be addressed. And I believe the sentiment of the Appropriations Committee, which we've discussed this at length, was we're fine with continuing to go forward and evaluate as the auditor has requested, though we feel we have extensive information on the majority of the properties already, and that those things can be done in tandem with the design because this is going to be a long process regardless. I know a couple of the folks mentioned, doing phasing, doing some of these different things, and that is certainly a possibility. The whole process of moving forward with design and concepts and refining the processes so that we will understand, okay, what are the specific elements? What are those going to cost? How would we want to phase it if that's necessary? Additionally, it's going to take a year and a half to work through the design process just for the 30% design. Then you get through the 60, which is like the more detailed aspects of it. So we're 2 years out regardless. Plus, then we're going to have a better understanding of all of the different elements in the benching area that are going to be removed as part of the benching project. And so, yes, this is a conversation that we have been having multiple times. The auditor and I just differ a bit on our perspective of the timing, and I believe that we can do them at the same time because we know that they're items that are going to need to be done regardless. But we are aware, we're going in, eyes wide open, and we're happy to continue to investigate to make folks feel more comfortable.
Can I follow up with that?
Yeah, Mr. Hellman.
Are you confident, and maybe Jeremy or one of the engineer can comment on this, are you confident that whatever environmental issues are there are going to be able to be addressed?
Yes, I am.
By somebody other than us?
Well, it depends, right? So some of the properties in the area we own, which we would be responsible
Yes,
for.
in that
Others,
case, yes.
are being done, and per the memorandum of understanding with the Maumee Watershed Conservancy District and the Hancock County Commissioners, they would be responsible for the properties within the project area as they're doing the work. That's already been part of it, just as it was in phase 1. Additionally, a benefit is that as we're doing this work, one, we could adjust and say, at Anchor Park, there are issues related to, okay, there was an oil spill on it that was minimal. It's safe for the continued use as it's been now. We're not breaking into the ground, so it's right. Or there are also a lot of brownfield grant programs out there through the state to be able to get them cleaned up. So yes, I'm confident that as we move forward with the information that we have, I feel comfortable that we're not going to see a significant, huge issue, but that we're also going to be able to move forward with remediating anything that were to come up.
Ms. Fishing.
At the last appropriations, when we talked about doing the phase 1, phase 2, I said, how long was that going to take? And I thought it had like a really quick turnaround. Like we already started it, or on the properties that we own.
There are a significant number of phase 1s already completed, as well as a number of phase 2s. Those have already been kind of shared and mapped out. They're on the spreadsheet where it defines phase 1s were completed. On the properties that the auditor had requested additional environmental be done, we have been working through, the auditor and I worked to put out kind of that scope request. We have 3 firms that have responded. We're reviewing those, and I would expect to contract. It does take about a month and a half. So we'll have that information, but then again, that's something that we can be doing in tandem because we have that information. We'd be able to continue to move forward. So that is not a significantly long
But we'll
process.
know from that in a month and a half. We're going to know if we have aliens coming out of the ground that we can't be moving dirt, or we're going to know that it's going to be a feasible project.
I would go back. First of all, it's a feasible project. The information and the aspects we would be doing, you could potentially reposition something or not break ground in a certain area. However, I'm pretty sure that based off of the fact that we have had these as parks and properties and items, we're not going to be having aliens coming out of the ground. The biggest identified concern was the Rainick property, which is currently in the process. In the next 2 weeks, will be completed because of the chromium. I know there's concerns with landfills and waste and old river bench and all of that, but the folks that have evaluated this area also note, related based off of what we see on this parcel we believe to be this because of that. So there has been extensive review of these areas. I don't want the message that continues to be put out to the public is that we are being irresponsible with moving forward on this, and I think that is not the case. We're being, I think the term that people use a lot is out of an abundance of caution, we're moving forward with additional reviews, and so I think that we're going over and above. We're investing money in these additional things. I understand the concerns, but I also think that we also have a lot of history in this area to be comfortable that we're not going to be digging up radioactive aliens.
So I think the word confident is great, but I can't throw money as a council person on the word confident. But I like hearing that you said in a month and a half, we're going to have our I's dotted and T's crossed to be able to move forward and know anything. So I would think at the end of the day, we should table this until we have that last piece to make sure we're not spending money too quickly and getting the cart before the horse.
Mr. Stashak.
Yeah, I'm a little disappointed again to hear the mayor claim knowledge about environmental that she certainly does not have. At best, the statements are misleading. At worst, maybe deceitful. What we have here is a situation where there have been reports all the way up and down the river from east to west that were done because of the Corps engineers' involvement. Those phase ones are clear. There are issues. Steve Wilson himself acknowledges that they have no idea what filled in the spots where Civitan Park is, where the river used to exist, and that we won't know until we start to dig unless we test. It's clear from people who know that it's wise to know what you're getting into before you turn dirt. The statement that if we find something, we'll deal with it then, forgets one thing. The deal with it then costs money. And all I'm saying is be patient so that we have a handle on how much money it costs. And to say we think we'll get brownfield, or we think we'll get this, or we think we'll get that, let's know. Let's be responsible with the taxpayers' dollars. Again, I'm all for doing the park. I'm all for moving forward. I'm excited about this. It's going to be wonderful for our community. I think Mr. Schindeldecker did a great job painting a picture of us walking or driving up Main Street. All I'm saying is allow the due diligence and proper process to occur. And I think that's very, very important. And you have one other option here. You have one other option that you don't even know about. I spoke with bond counsel. Because you guys are in a position where you have the opportunity, in this case because you're a municipality, to put this issue out for a non-binding public vote as to how you should proceed. You could have the law director write some language that says, we would like to know, are you as a citizen of this community in favor of a full-blown park and development in this area, or a green space? You can write it any way you want as a council. You can put it out to the public, and it's non-binding. You are not obligated to do it. And I share that with you because when this hit the paper, my office received an inquiry. We were requested, and I have done that, provided the full initiative petition information from the Brandman site, which I have been told is going to be used as a template for this site to go to the voters to restrict any investment of capital monies on this without a vote of the people. So if that happens and that initiative language is turned into my office in the next short period of time, as it's being told to me it's going to be, that it's being written by legal now, if that happens, you will have no choice as to what you do without votes. Maybe you need to slow down a little bit. I'm not telling you how to do your business, but you might want to consider involving the public a little bit more, as has been suggested in this room even tonight. Again, I don't presume to tell you what to do, but I can share with you what's happened in my perspective, and I can tell you got the cart before the horse. That's clear from where I sit. Thank you.
Mayor?
So I think one of the things I heard tonight from the public is that and I completely understand what you're saying, right? Folks are concerned about the level of investment that we're considering. And I think that I really want to point something out here, because multiple individuals, when they got up and spoke, they say, I want to understand what you're going to do with this, or what that cost of that is going to be, or can you phase it, or where the donations are coming from. And that's exactly what we're considering and trying to move forward tonight. We have to move forward in the process to begin to refine that. The concept before us is just that, a concept of the conversations that happened in public meetings with the Parks and Recreation Board over multiple months, where we discussed, okay, what are the things we would like to have? What are the things that we have to have? What are the things we don't want to see? And then they said, okay, here is what this can be. And they've given us a range. And I know I've referenced it a couple times, but it bears worth repeating, is, one of the big components is a pedestrian bridge. Replacing and updating our existing pedestrian bridge, which at some point in our not too distant future, we're going to have to do, regardless of if it's part of this project and we make it something really special, or we just, try to put lipstick on the pig and let it limp along. The second is the Riverwalk. Another component that is going to be a significant part of this project, that south bank, I hear people, dismayed with it. It's going to have to be replaced. We can do it as part of this comprehensive project. I hear people asking about the dog park or better areas for the farmers market. These are all components that we want to work through and refine. And we bring in an expert through an RFQ process that was selected because they have the expertise, one, to develop in a flood area to make sure that continues to be the primary focus, two, that it's complementary of our existing park system, and three, so that we can then refine the components and determine what we really want, what do we want this to be, what is that design, if we want these other things, what is the estimated cost and how do we plan that out? And again, I would just reiterate, I appreciate the auditor saying that, we can just wait a little bit and we'll get more information. But every meeting I have with him, he says that, and things kind of get drug along. And at this point, we're re-dotting I's and recrossing T's. And the insinuation that we're trying to be irresponsible or manipulative or deceptive is ridiculous. But what we're trying to say, and what the conversations, with council and all of the meetings we have, is we understand that in these properties, there are environmental risks based off of all the information we have. Regardless of whether we do it as part of this project or not, these are going to have to be addressed. We can do both moving forward with the very rudimentary early stages of moving this contract forward so that they can plan, get things together, we can start discussing elements while also doing these other things. And so I just want to be very clear. I in no way feel that we are doing this, rushing this or being irresponsible or not taking this seriously. I take this extremely seriously. This is a huge amount of money. That's why we need to step into the process so we can better start refining it and better go out and seek that support and better determine, the plan. Right now, somebody used the building a house. Yeah, we want to build a house, but now we need to choose the neighborhood and how we want the driveway to be positioned and what shingles we want on the roof and the light, all of those details, which we can't do until we enter into the contract because we're not the experts. So I just, some of these things I feel like, we've been discussing it, and then every time we get into a meeting, they say, well, you're not discussing it enough. But right now, I don't think we can have any further, more detailed, engaging conversation with the public until we take this next step.
Ms. Fishy.
I think what I'm hearing from the public and not from the auditor as running this conversation between the two of you, the public, I think everybody on council gets either a phone call or an email or when you're out at a restaurant, somebody makes a comment with regards to this park. You talk about the big dollar items like the bridge and the walkway and things like that. I think those are the concerns. When we are doing a design as a Mercedes instead of a Ford or a Chevy, as you said, right? We are putting things into this plan that we may not even need, or that the people in a whole don't want to see because of a fear of increasing of taxes down the road to be able to pay for things and wanting to make sure that their tenants can pay their rent. People want to see something there. I want to see something there more than just green space. But irresponsible, you used that word a couple of times, it would be irresponsible of me to say, let's keep this cart moving before we're ready and spending this money, because it's roughly 10% of the cost of the entire project, which is $40 million. If we take it back to something more reasonable and the citizens talk about, hey, we'd like to see you do something with the park area, the green space on Main Cross that's never had anything done that's a neighborhood park, or Riverside needs some updates. I think it's great that we're doing the restrooms at Swale and Rawson Park, but people want to see it spread around more than just in one spot. And it would be irresponsible if we didn't have all of our EPA issues figured out. It would be, and if we should go back to Park and Rec or to committee and reevaluate our wants and needs, maybe the public would be more receptive to moving forward with something wonderful there, but on a smaller scale, I think is what's happening.
Okay, Mayor.
Sorry. I appreciate this conversation because it's extremely important. And, I'll try to hit on a couple of things. So one, we are definitely doing investments in our parks throughout the community, right? We're doing improvements. The last 3 years, we've been improving the band shell. Shelter House 15 has gotten a complete facelift. We're continually working. I know next week we're meeting with West Park to talk about playground equipment and some changes we've made there. We've put a new playground out in Bernard Park. We have been, I can't even name, Rawson tennis courts. We're talking about all these different things. So by no means do I think that we are neglecting the other parks. I think what's really important to distinguish is, one, obviously the scale of this. Two, it also is, it is a connector. It is, we talk about downtown, and downtown is an easier spot for us to work with because obviously government's down here. We have all of the connections, but downtown's study after study after study shows your downtown is the heartbeat of your community, and go into any downtown and it's going to represent the vibrancy of your community. When we talk about creating a community that attracts professionals, this is exactly the thing we have to do to attract professionals. And at what level this investment is, I can't speak to that specific because that's what we need to refine. Holly, I know in one of the meetings you said we should take the pedestrian bridge and connect it to Crawford Street. I don't think that's exactly where we want to spend the money, but we have to refine because obviously a bridge to Crawford Street's a lot different than a bridge cost to Anchor Park, and a bridge that is similar to the one in Dublin is different than one similar to the one we have right now. And that's why we have to work through those elements to be able to define it. Now, the way the contract is written, it is for that 30% design, assuming that our scale and cost and elements, because they're not going to have to design every single element to 30% as we start working through, right? If we start giving 10 options of restrooms and we say, yeah, we don't want, the granite stone one, then that quickly helps us start eliminating cost and refining it. And that's the process you have to work through. I am adamant, and I know the front page of the newspaper kind of surprised me, but that's exactly what I believe. This is a generational opportunity to invest in our community, to attract the professionals that want to be a part of this community, to create that gathering space, to make sure that we are creating recreation in our community. We're not Arizona, we're not Lake Erie, we're not the Rocky Mountains, so we have to create recreation in a very different way. And I think that the public will be very pleased as we work through the process for them to continue to engage and be able to provide feedback to help us determine what this space ends up looking like. And I think it's, it continues to be stated that it's $40 million, and that's not necessarily the case. We have to work through the process to refine it. That is if we buy all the things that we want at the Mercedes level and do that. And that's why we have to move forward to be able to work through that process.
Mr. Niemeyer.
I'd like to make a motion, we finish the meeting.
Well, we can't adjourn. We have other business yet, but I guess what I would do is limit any further questions from council and let the administrators discuss it amongst themselves. This is a council meeting. Any other discussion from council?
Second. Did I get a
Gil.
Seconded to move on.
All right. Hearing no other questions or comments, we're going to move on.
A letter from Mayor Mern regarding key performance indicators.
Questions or comments? Letter be, Mr. Russell.
I noticed that we were, there was concern on the overtime, and I appreciate the explanation that was included, but just note that for citizens who didn't read through this, our overtime budget is higher than we expected, and the primary reason is the continued challenge to find and hire police officers and firemen, and that's going to be a continued challenge for the city, and we need to continue to be aggressive in how aggressive, creative, and nonstop in our recruitment of police officers and firemen. So I appreciate the inclusion of that.
Mayor?
I promise I will be brief. Just a couple of quick notes on that. One, we did have a swearing in for 2 firefighters and 4 police officers on Monday. So super excited to have them. 2 of those police officers were lateral transfers, which is something that we implemented late last year, early this year, which has definitely helped us. That allows folks that have been serving in another police department to transfer in without all of the civil service testing, keep some of their seniority, different things like that that are really beneficial. And I just want to continue to say thank you for the support of the Strict Center, because that definitely has gained attention of potential candidates across the country, showing that we support both at the beginning and throughout their careers to make sure that they are safe and well trained is extremely important to them and their families.
Other questions or comments? Ms. Frischie?
That overtime number, does that include the water department as well? Or is that separated? Can you just touch briefly then on the $12,000 in overtime from water billing this last month, of why that was so much higher?
Mr. Martin?
The water department is because of the transmitter project that we front-loaded to actually get all the transmitters in the ground so we could move forward with that. We could have true readings. So that will be that will level out as we move through the rest of the year.
And one other question on that. We haven't gotten the budget out for the water department from the beginning of the year to show everybody's performances. And we're practically to the end of the year. Are you almost ready to have that? I think I talked with the mayor about 6 months ago regarding the water and
Annual report?
Yes.
Those should be on there. I will follow up on that.
Yeah, thanks.
Other questions or comments? Letter to be filed.
A letter from, or add-on letter from Fire Chief Eberly regarding PUCO Hazmat Training Grant Award.
Questions or comments? Letter to be filed. Committee reports.
A committee of the whole meeting was held on Wednesday, August 9th, 2023, to discuss the Carlin property Habitat for Humanity. Service Safety Director Martin introduced Wendy McCormick, Executive Director of Habitat for Humanity, a PowerPoint presentation describing Habitat's desire to transfer 2 parcels located on Carlin Street to the Blanchard Valley Port Authority from the city of Findlay. After that transfer, it would then be transferred to Habitat for Humanity. The PowerPoint presentation was introduced by Scott Rhodes, board president. 2 handouts were included.
Mr. Wobser?
I'll make I guess we need a motion first to accept
Sure.
the committee of the whole report. I'll make that motion.
Second, Mr. Russell. Discussion. Go ahead.
So, Mayor, where do we stand on this? So we had the presentation from Wendy and Scott, and certainly appreciate that. So what's your next move on this situation?
To talk to you all about how you felt and how you would like us to proceed. So I obviously we were going to kind of discuss that with you all.
Okay. Well.
Well, I guess one of the follow-up questions was there any action items coming out of that you wanted us, other information that you wanted?
I don't believe anything came up in the meeting that was an action item. Rob, do you remember anything? Jeremy? No, I don't think there were any specifics. I think that just the conversation is on the overall process or the giving this property to Habitat. I'll just say this, and this is where I stand on this. I certainly appreciate what Habitat does and where they're coming from, what they're trying to do. I don't believe this is the right thing that we should do with the property. However, I think we're onto something, that this property could be used for the way it's platted out that Habitat showed us with those houses in that type of format. I think that's a great thing to look at there. However, I think we should open it up to all builders to build in that type of scenario. I think we should also maybe take a look as council as putting in the infrastructure and have the builders pay us back over a period of time as a way to spur on the building of this type of infrastructure and this type of housing. Now, if we want to take that, do that, and then along with it, deed some of those properties to Habitat, so be it. We can look at that too. I have a hard time turning this whole situation over to Habitat, where quite honestly, I think they do their best work when they do infill work on old properties that have been taken down, and they put up a nice new place.
Mr. Russell.
Actually, Rob had one to do, and that was to try to get some comparison or some estimated costs or values of the land. And I'm sure you have that for me tonight, right, Rob? The only one question that came to mind, and we had a few of us discussed on the way out. I was not clear as to Habitat's intent, whether the roads would be privately owned by Habitat in almost like an HOA, or if they are public roads that are going to be created to our road standards, and that Dave and company would be snow plowing and et cetera. And that question would need to, for me, need to get answered. I wondered if the next step for this is a further discussion in a committee, either ad hoc or appropriations. And I'm just thinking out loud, kind of asking a general question to my fellow council reps.
My first comment would be probably appropriations, but that's up to you guys. Ms. Frishy.
So I was not able to be at that meeting, but I have gotten a lot of feedback on that. And the questions from the folks living out in that area, they would like to see their infrastructure completed first before we start adding more infrastructure out there. The other thing was, we all know that is on bedrock out there, and that could be a very expensive project to put the infrastructure in for water and sewer. But I think maybe the next step would be to have an open meeting with the folks of West Park to get their feedback on this. And then part two, we talk about, you brought up Habitat. I've always known Habitat, they don't own the properties at the end of the day. I mean, at the end of the day, the goal is for the individual to eventually own that home. So to me, they're more of a pass-through. So it's like we're giving away land as a pass-through, which I don't know if that makes sense.
Ms. Warnicki.
Okay, this is just what little I know and where my thoughts were discussing it with others. My first thought was just to do a gift. I don't know when I've ever really heard of a city or a government necessarily doing that. So if I was not on council and was just a citizen, that's just kind of was a negative thought to me. Then Grant asked Mr. Martin, I always want to use first names, sorry, what the value of the land was. Now, we drove out there to see it, and this is coming from someone I know that has numbers on some of this, just as far as average. For the most part, this person told me that farm ground is going for $10,000 an acre or higher as farm ground. Now that would be $250,000 instead of just the $150,000 that we paid for it originally. But also, it would seem to me, this is just my supposition here, that's as farm ground. If you're selling that ground to be used for building, I would think it would be higher.
Ms. Mayor.
So I appreciate the conversation. I do think going to a committee is beneficial. I'm happy to have the discussions, on if it makes sense. I had heard from a couple of private builders that they had concerns that really wouldn't be property that they would be interested in for the price point of homes that they would be wanting to sell. And I think, it's great for us to look at the community as a whole, the benefit, not just a short-term return on selling a property for the city's benefit. So I think that those are all things that we can work through. And I would say probably appropriations or an ad hoc committee, even planning and zoning may make sense, given that it's talking kind of about the property itself. But I think having that further discussion and being able to work through the details makes a lot of sense.
Mr. Russell.
Just some quick conversations in the back row here, and a follow up a little bit on the strategic planning conversations we had at 5 o'clock today. I think that an ad hoc committee here makes more sense than P&Z or appropriations. As we look to implement the parts of the strategic plan, we think that the ad hoc committees potentially will get a lot more use as we tackle specific items in the strategic planning document. And this is kind of like a precursor of one. So I would make a motion that we create an ad hoc committee of members to be determined to further study this question and report back to council.
Second, Mr. Baumann. Any further discussion? Mr. Hellman.
Yeah, I'd like to add just one comment. I don't have a problem with the motion that was made, and I think it's probably a good thing to do, no doubt. But I guess I'd like to remind the council members in the group that Habitat for Humanity does a lot more than just put people in a house. They give them a lot of financial consulting. They make sure that they're aware of what their debt is, that they're going to be able to, what their income is, and counsel them on what it is to own a home and help those folks who normally are not in the housing market. And I think if we go another route, we need to be cognizant of that, that you're going to be serving maybe a different clientele than what Habitat does.
Other questions or comments? Just a second, Mr. Russell. I just want to remind the rules on an ad hoc. The President Pro Tem shall appoint members to all ad hoc committees. Confirmation for the creation of an ad hoc committee and membership thereof is required by the majority of council. All ad hoc committee meetings shall be open to the public, and no ad hoc committee shall have a number of members equal to or greater than the majority of council. Mr. Russell.
Yeah, I appreciate the clarification because we're just bringing this up right now. If the council's desire is to have an ad hoc, then I would recommend then what I would do is have conversations, ask for folks to contact me if interested, and then present a slate of members of the ad hoc at our next meeting, our first meeting in September, at which time council can make a vote on the membership. But I am looking for council's input as to whether they want to go in ad hoc direction tonight.
Ms. Frisch.
I don't understand the point of your ad hoc, because usually when we have an ad hoc committee, it's changing council's rules or it's coming up with something out of the ordinary in policy. So what are you looking to get out of an ad hoc that you wouldn't get out of appropriations or a committee of a whole?
Mr. Wobser.
I think this is about as out of the ordinary as we get when we're looking at a piece of property that the city owns, and we're been asked to give it to somebody, give it to an entity. I think it falls in between appropriations and P&Z, and honestly, I think this is a great place for an ad hoc committee to stand in and take over and come back and report on this.
Ms. Frisch.
Typically, we don't even have these discussions in the public. They're usually an executive session before we even get to this point. So if you're just saying you're determining if we want to sell the property or what we want to sell it for, I'm not in favor of an ad hoc. I'd rather see it as a committee of a whole or appropriation.
A motion and second has been made to form an ad hoc committee. Is there any further discussion or questions? Hearing none. All those in favor of the formation of an ad hoc say aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay?
Nay.
It is agreed to.
Okay.
President?
Yes.
And then I would ask council members who would be interested in serving on that committee to contact me, and I'll have a letter to council in time for the
And we approved the committee report, though, right?
September 5th.
It was approved. It's a while ago.
I'm trying to remember if we did.
In
We
time for the
approved-
September
it just
5th.
No, we haven't.
We did
That's
approve the
the
committee
motion.
report?
Mm.
Okay. I'm sorry.
No,
Okay.
I forgot.
There was a motion and a second to approve the committee report. All those in favor of the committee report say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. The committee report is adopted.
Good catch. A committee of the whole meeting was held on Wednesday, August 9th, 2023, to provide a demonstration and discuss body-worn cameras. Police Chief Matthias and Sergeant Walters presented a PowerPoint presentation describing the City of Findlay Police Department body-worn cameras manufactured by Axon Enterprise. A demo by Sergeant Walters. Hardware, software, record retention, and policy were discussed.
Mr. Russell.
Move to accept the committee report.
Second, Mr. Greeno. Discussion. Mr. Russell.
Mr. Martin, did we turn them on Monday?
We turned them on at shift change, 7 a.m. on Monday. Everything's going as planned. It's working very well.
So the data loads and that transition, people are you seeing them affect efficiency of shift change at all, or too early to tell?
It's too early to tell. They're in the docking stations and we're like, oh yeah, I gotta grab it type stuff. So the muscle memory of grabbing that new tool, but I'll have an update as we get through the first couple weeks. But everything's back office is working as it's supposed to.
So can we expect like a status report after the first month, like second meeting of September?
Sounds great.
Thank you.
I'll have that.
Motion. Is there any further discussion? We have a motion and a second. All those in favor of the committee report say aye. Any opposed, nay. The committee report is adopted.
The Planning and Zoning Committee, to whom is referred a request from Findlay City Schools to rezone 200 West Lincoln Street from R3 small lot residential to C3 downtown commercial. We recommend approval as requested.
Mr. Baumann.
Move to accept the committee report.
Second, Mr. Slough. Discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor of the committee report say aye. Any opposed, nay. The committee report is adopted.
Planning and Zoning Committee, to whom was referred a request to review changes to the zoning code. We recommend with recommended changes included that the zoning code go to the full city council for consideration and approval.
Mr. Russell.
Move for acceptance of the committee report.
Second, Mr. Slough. Discussion. Mr. Russell.
So included in your packet was the revised zoning code. That's why your packets were so thick. One page or part of it that I would really refer folks to is the couple of pages immediately after the committee report, which details the changes, kind of a summary of the changes that were made. And this has been a process that's been going on. Golly, I think I'm sure we started the first this year to start looking at these changes, and there's a lot there. If it is the council's desire, we can easily have a committee of the whole meeting, have Mr. Cordonier and the other folks at Hancock Regional Planning, Mr. Mercer probably too, to kind of give a summary overview of the changes. If that is not desired, you can always reach out to Matt or Jacob or myself individually. It's at the council's pleasure.
Mr. Wobser.
I think that's a great idea. Quite honestly, that was a huge package to swallow, quite honestly, and work through. I appreciate the effort that's gone into it. It's evident. But I would like some additional detail and have an opportunity to ask some questions.
So to have a committee of the whole, there must be a motion and a second. And go ahead, Mr. Wobser.
I'll make a motion for a committee of the whole meeting to review the the zoning ordinance code.
Second, Mr. Palmer. All those in favor of the committee or the committee of the whole as discussed, say aye. Any opposed, nay. Now, Mr. Wobser, by you making that motion, you are now going to be the chair of that, and you will make sure that we find a date and a time that works for everybody. Thank you.
No good deed goes unpunished. Okay, thanks.
Check with Schindel, Decker, and see how the weather will be that day. Mr. Russell.
As chair of planning and zoning, I'll take one for Jeff. So I'll get with folks and the folks at Hancock Regional Planning and look to get this scheduled.
You owe him a big one there, Jeff.
It will happen after the, due to my travel plans, it will happen after the September 5th meeting. So sometime between September 5th and the 19th.
Any other comments? Okay, thank you. let us know. Legislation, start with resolutions.
Did we approve the committee report?
Oh, I'm sorry. We didn't approve the committee report. All those in favor of the committee report say aye. Any opposed, nay. That is approved. I covered you once, you covered me once.
Maybe we did and I didn't remember. Okay. Third reading for Resolution 16, 2023. A resolution transferring funds within appropriated funds and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Slough.
I'd move for adoption of Resolution 16-2023.
Second, Mr. Palmer. Discussion. All those in favor of the resolution say aye after your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Ballman? Ms. Frishy?
Aye.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer?
Aye.
Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Nay.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki?
Aye.
Mr. Wobser?
Aye.
The resolution is adopted.
Second reading for Resolution 18, 2023. A resolution adopting and implementing the City of Findlay, Ohio Strategic Plan Framework, Findlay Forward.
Mr. Russell.
This item is tabled, needs to be lifted from the table before we can, and it doesn't need a second, it needs only one reading and it was tabled.
I apologize.
Thank you. Correction will be made.
So I would move to lift this ordinance, or this resolution from the table.
Second, Mr. Wobser. All those in favor of lifting the resolution from the table say aye. After your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Ms. Frishy?
Nay.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer?
Aye.
Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki?
Aye.
Mr. Wobser?
Aye.
And Mr. Ballman?
Aye.
The resolution is lifted from the table. Mr. Wobser.
Make a motion to approve the resolution 18, 2023.
Second, Mr. Baumann. Discussion. Ms. Frishy.
I thought we would be giving that 3 readings since we're adopting the strategic plan.
Mr. Wobser.
This is the third reading.
It says second.
No.
It requires one reading. This is the third meeting that it's been on, available to look at from the,
Mine says second.
well, I understand that was a typo. It was tabled after the first reading on August 1st, or excuse me, July, whatever our first meeting in July was.
Other questions or
So
comments?
this is the third meeting.
Hearing none. All those in favor of the resolution say aye. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. Say, I'm sorry. I had to think. You got me confused on the second reading. All those in favor of the resolution say aye after your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer?
Nay.
Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki?
Aye.
Mr. Wobser?
Aye.
Mr. Ballman?
Aye.
And Ms. Frishy?
Nay.
2 nays.
The resolution is adopted.
First reading for Resolution 19, 2023, a resolution approving the expenditures made by the Auditor's Office on the attached list of vouchers which either exceed the purchase order or were incurred without a purchase order, exceeding the statutory limit of $3,000, all in accordance with Ohio Revised Code 5705.41D.
Mr. Wobser.
Make a motion to approve 19, 2023.
Second, Mr. Slough. Discussion. Mr. Stashak.
Yes, thank you. The second item on here is due course of business. That tends to happen every year just because of the timing of the insurance renewals and how that works. However, the first one, I have some concerns because we have here a request for $9,000 expenditure for Christina Cross at Bricker to opine on potential conflicts for the law director and with regard to regionalizing our water system or water department. It's time to shine a little light on this. On October 22nd, Economic Development of October 22, Economic Development reported that they met with the Village of Arlington to discuss the possibility of becoming part of our water system or putting our water systems together. The Alliance has a statement saying they have plans for our roads, utilities, and long-term vision. Mr. Greeno, I think it's time for you and your committee to figure out who's running our water system, whether it's the Alliance or us, because none of you, when I polled you, knew about these types of things going on. The regionalization is a direct threat to the cost and supply viability long-term for the water users who live in Findlay. Not only that, many of our citizens remember that drought in the 80s. There was not enough water, and nothing has changed with our supply and source since that drought, and that's something we need to remember. Our water and sewer system is effectively paid off. This is a legacy of a lifetime for our community. The strategic plan is clear. Our community wants to stay a small town. No matter how you spin that, that's what they want. And that the administration, in looking at this, promised, when we started this meter project, which was not and did not properly follow the design build process, that was clear. They promised they would get out there and read those meters. That did not happen, and this is a mess. It was necessary to this point for my office to spend almost $15,000 on an internal control review for the utility billing department. The follow-up report to that is about to come out. I saw a view of that follow-up, the draft review, just about 24 hours ago, and we still are not fully compliant with the recommendations. We have things to do in that department. And not only that, multiple times the mayor has talked about raising the rates, not only the water and the sewer, but the storm rates as well, and moving potentially millions of dollars from our general fund. Mr. Greeno, I'm going to encourage you and your committee to get control of this and get a handle on what's going on with our water and our sewer departments. And that's my comment as your fiscal officer.
Ms. Mayor.
So I can't remember exactly how long ago it was, but I believe it was about 2 years ago now that I informed this committee that I was having conversation with both North Baltimore and Arlington regarding water regionalization. That is not something I've been hiding. That is not something new. That is something that is worth vetting because we do have supply. We have neighboring communities that recognize that economies of scale are essential for long-term management of their systems. Yes, the Alliance had a conversation with other communities because they serve the entire county. And those documents I've multiple times shared with this group, as I have pointed out to you. Good for them to talking to the other communities and planning and having discussions. Those are completely two separate conversations. Additionally, a couple weeks ago, Auditor, I did reach out to you and ask you to have a meeting with Chairman Greeno and Chairman Wobser to discuss such items as the ones you just brought up, and you refused. So I don't appreciate you continuing to play games and make it appear like I'm trying to hide things or leave you out of conversations when I explicitly ask you to do your job and be a part of a conversation and you refuse.
I'm sorry. Let's move on. Ms. Frischie.
So back to this resolution or resolution. So we have a little bit of audience here. I don't know if anybody would be willing to raise their hand. Have we heard about regionalizing our water system since 2019 when the mayor came in? Mr. Schindeldicker has. Okay, but nobody else here has. I have not heard it publicly
Mr.
ever
Baumann.
be discussed. I'm not done speaking,
I'm
so
sorry.
I call point of order because I have the floor. So my question to the mayor would be, where did you feel, well, coming on as mayor in 2019, that this was a priority to regionalize our water, but to spend this money without having committee meetings with Mr. Greeno? Or did Mr. Greeno know that you're having these meetings and that you are getting legal counsel from Bricker Eckler regarding this? And do we have more bills that we're going to be seeing?
So, Councilwoman Frischie, I believe the majority of council members were aware this conversation was happening. The email may have been sent out when you were not on council because there was a gap in your tenure. So yes, they are aware that we were having conversations, and as is always appropriate, to engage legal counsel, especially experts, which Breaker Graydon has the experts to be able to provide us what type of contract structures would be appropriate, what type of items, what does the process look like to look at integration systems, all of those items that are appropriate due diligence for the administration to do before bringing all of that information in detail to have a productive conversation with the committee. So yes, council is informed. Yes, the auditor was informed, and we're not quite ready for more detailed conversations. Additionally, you know what? It is frustrating sometimes that public conversations happen. North Baltimore and Arlington councils have both had conversations in public meetings about this topic, which is one of the reasons I reached out and said, hey, by the way, we've had an initial conversation with them. They're going to be bringing this up at their council meeting, and that wasn't covered. It wasn't intentionally being hidden, but there are some things that have to be done behind the scenes to make sure that once we get to a certain point, because Lord knows if I brought an idea up and didn't have full vetting of it, I would be crucified for not bringing all the details and making sure I'm doing my due diligence. That's my job.
Mr. Baumann.
Move to call the question.
I have a question.
Mr. Russell?
Second.
The motion is to call the question. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay?
Nay.
The question is called.
We are on 19 and we
All
didn't have
those
a
in
motion
favor
to
of
adopt.
Resolution 19-2023 say aye. If your name is called, those opposed, nay.
Mr. Hellman,
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer,
Aye.
Mr. Palmer,
Aye.
Mr. Russell,
Aye.
Mr. Slough,
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki, Mr. Wobser,
Aye.
Mr. Ballman,
Aye.
Ms. Frishy,
Nay.
Mr. Greeno.
Aye.
The resolution is adopted. Ordinances.
That one's tabled. Third reading for ordinance 2023-71. An ordinance authorizing the mayor, service safety director, and/or city engineer of the city of Findlay, Ohio, to enter into a contract with Strand and Associates Incorporated to provide design and engineering services of the downtown recreation area Phase 2 benching of the Blanchard River, project number 319-13700, appropriating funds and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Baumann.
Move for adoption of ordinance number 2023-071.
Second, Mr. Slough. Discussion. Ms. Frishy.
I would also like to note from our earlier discussion, we have not addressed traffic and pedestrian concerns, and we had a citizen come to our last meeting and speak. And then I'll remind everybody, we still have our EPA issues going on, and that the mayor has mentioned that the county is short on their flood dollars for the Norfolk Bridge project of flood mitigation, and there is another $5 million that she seems to be earmarking that we might need above and beyond this project.
Mr. Wobser.
I'd like to make a motion to table this tonight until we get further information.
We already had the motion to adopt, so it's okay.
Yeah, I don't know. We're done. So we have a motion to adopt in a second, and now he's asking to table it.
We didn't do a vote.
We haven't voted yet. We were just under discussion.
Yeah.
Table instead?
Okay, that's
Okay.
fine. We have a motion to table. Ms. Frishy? Is that a second?
Yes, it was.
Thank you. All those in favor of tabling the ordinance, say aye. If your name is called, those opposed, nay.
Mr. Niemeyer? This is to
Nay.
table. Mr. Palmer?
Nay.
Mr. Russell?
Nay.
Mr. Slough?
Nay.
Ms. Warnicki?
Nay.
Mr. Wobser?
Aye.
Mr. Ballman?
Nay.
Ms. Frishy?
Aye.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Nay.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Correct, so it does not fail.
Vote is 7-3. The motion to table is not adopted. Ms. Warnicki. At this point in time, we're still under discussion under the motion and the second to approve.
I just wanted to make a statement. I know this came up with the rezoning on McPherson last time, and comes up frequently sometimes that we're not listening to citizens, and we do listen to them, but there's always two sides to a story. And although there was only Tom Schindeldecker here tonight, Ms. Frishy had mentioned going out to dinner or wherever, and I've been to meetings at 50 North and Church and wherever, and I have heard a lot of positive comments about the park, how it will be wonderful for the community, and please go ahead and get this seen through, and boy, I can't wait to get this started. So, you know, it's like the vote that happened with the election last week. There's two sides to every issue. And I just want to make a statement that no is not the only thing that we're hearing on council.
Mr. Baumann?
I guess I would just say, perhaps not as eloquently as Mr. Schindeldecker did earlier, but
it is no secret that our community has a workforce issue. And as a younger person, the average workforce out there looks like me, it looks like Jeremy, it looks like Christina, it looks like Councilman Palmer. And in order to keep and retain a healthy and vibrant workforce, amenities such as this park are necessary. What did I do?
Next time, you may not want to insult the other 90% of council in your comments. Just word to the wise.
Still work.
Hold him, Slough, I'll hit him.
And still pay taxes. Jesus.
I said what I said.
Ms. Frisch?
I think if council, the majority wants to move forward with this, I would make a motion to amend the ordinance to remove the declaring of an emergency on this piece of legislation. So if the public does want to do something, they have that option. So that's a motion.
Mr. Wobser?
Second.
All those in favor of the amendment as proposed, say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Palmer?
Nay.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki?
Nay.
Mr. Wobser?
Aye.
Mr. Ballman?
Nay.
Ms. Frishy?
Aye.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
And Mr. Niemeyer?
Aye.
3 nay.
The amendment is not adopted.
Yeah. it
Oh,
was-
7-3?
Yeah, in favor.
Oh, I'm sorry, it was 7-3 in favor. I had it the other way, I'm sorry. So as amended, let me catch my breath here. So the ordinance as amended, we are still under discussion. Mr. Wobser?
This is a great project. I think this needs to be done. We need to move forward with this. However, it's not time yet to move forward with it. We need a couple more things to be done. We're less than 30 days away from getting that done, and we can move forward. We're just right on the precipice of having all of our I's crossed and T's dotted. Yeah.
That older group.
I still pay my taxes, Plummet. So I'm going to vote no on this because I think we need to wait. We could always reintroduce it at a later time. That's where I'm going with this, and we could take our time and get everything else put in place and then reintroduce.
Ms. Frishy?
I'm going to be echoing Councilman Wobser on that and kind of rebut Beth's statement. I have not heard anybody that is against the project. I think we're lumping things together where everybody wants to move forward, but what that looks like and what that cost is where the discussion is. And I think we just need to, again, wait till we're ready. So I'm going to be following Councilman Wobser.
Ms. Warren?
Well, I would just make a statement to that this ordinance is not saying let's build the park for 40 million. This ordinance is to get the plan so we know what's going to be coming. That's why we need to get it started.
Ms. Frishy?
And if we wait 30 to 45 days, we'll know spending 1.5 million to get started was a smart move if we have all our other pieces put together.
Mr. Russell?
I served with Councilman Wobser on Parks and Rec, 3, 4, 5 years ago. And this park as a concept was in discussion at that time, especially as I remember as we looked at talking about the future of the skate park, there was some suggestion that this would be a good location for it. And so the genesis of this idea has been around for quite a long time. You could see the opportunity there. And then as the citizens, I echo Beth's comments. I have received so many folks, the input from so many folks, and including emails in support. this project and wanting to go forward to see what the next steps are. And people are bringing up ideas, as Tom mentioned, that I just never had even considered. Farmers market was one, hearing the folks talk about all the different opportunities they could think of with that. Additionally, in our strategic planning process, I heard over and over again citizens saying, talking about the riverfront and recreational opportunities, and it was so much so in the strategic planning that we just passed. This has been talked to in items 2.7, 5.3, and 6.3, and so for those, 2.7 is a well-run city government. And that's the overall objective, and the item is maintain, plan, invest in capital assets to ensure they are safe, affordable, and high quality. And really the big one is 5.3, and that's under the objective of an attractive place. And item 5 is reimagine the riverfront throughout the community. And that's exactly what this project is. And 6.3 talks, an active community talks about continually to improve accommodations and accessibility of existing parks and recreational facilities. I mean, the 3 items addressed is specifically of our strategic plan talk to this, and for that reason, and all the citizens' input that I've received, and because I agree with Brian's comments too, we're in a fight for workers, and one of the ways that fight is done now is with recreational infrastructure. This project is vital. The next step is to get more detailed plans, and that can happen in conjunction with environmental review.
Any other questions or comments? Ms. Frishy?
My question, comment will come across very rude, but I'm going to say it anyway, right? Grant brought up strategic plan and marking off some numbers. Beth talked about the warm fuzzies that she hears. Brian is for the project, and a couple others. Everybody, again, is for it. But my question for you is, did all the people that tell you that they're for the project, did they tell you to jump the start of the race before we had all of our information? Or would they have told you to wait 30 to 45 days?
Questions or comments? Mr. Niemeyer.
Guess I might as well join. I'm going to have to vote no. Constituents voted for me to represent them. I can see myself that some council people don't represent the people that voted for them, and I think we ought to take that into consideration. It's not what me, myself, thinks. I represent the 6th Ward.
Other questions or comments? Mr. Russell.
Hearing the comments, maybe it is better to reconsider a tabling of this at this time, so we can give it more consideration. So I'll make that as a motion to table.
Do we have to motion to reconsider the table? Is that basically the same thing?
Well, we passed to amend it.
Okay, yep. Motion to table. Second, Mr. Wobser. All those in favor of tabling, say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Russell.
Aye.
Mr. Slough.
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki.
Nay.
Mr. Wobser.
Aye.
Mr. Ballman.
Nay.
Ms. Frishy.
Aye.
Mr. Greeno.
Aye.
Mr. Hellman.
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer.
My better judgment.
And Mr. Palmer.
Nay.
Motion to table is adopted.
We're never going to build this park.
Next.
I gotta find my place. Okay, third reading for ordinance 2020, no,
Yeah,
Yeah.
71. Oh, I'm sorry, 72.
ordinance 2023-72, an ordinance authorizing the mayor and/or service safety director of the city of Findlay, Ohio, to enter into a memorandum of understanding granting the city of Findlay permission to store various city equipment in the Findlay City School District Board of Education's vacant building located at 0 Blanchard Avenue, parcel number 61-000-101-7675, as set forth in the memorandum of understanding attached hereto as Exhibit A, and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Wobser,
Make a motion to approve 2023-72.
second Mr. Hellman, discussion. Ms. Frishy.
I'm just covering every ordinance. I'm going to keep us here till midnight since we need to be having these conversations. So I'm going to re-bring up this situation I touched on briefly before. The mayor said she does not need permission from council to do these types of things. However, we suddenly bring an ordinance to make sure that everything's A-OK now. I think it is extremely inappropriate to be using city workers outside the city for Findlay City Schools or for any school. That's no different than me having one of my city workers come plow my own driveway when it snows, or to mow my grass because I didn't have time to do it. That's not what our city workers are for. They're here for us, for all citizens. That's what our tax dollars are for. Part two of that is also regarding the bus garage. That agreement was not vetted through council. It is inappropriate. We have not had a discussion on storage shortage in any meeting, because I have an email from or text from the mayor that confirmed that with me. And then we have this property that is out that we're looking at for Habitat, which was originally supposed to be for our street department, which would have been out by the county garage and so forth, and centrally located. I don't know if that's a reason not to use it, but this whole transaction is completely inappropriate and does not earn my vote to pass it as an oops again after the fact.
Other questions or comments? Hearing none, all those in favor of the ordinance say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki?
Aye.
Mr. Wobser?
Aye.
Mr. Ballman?
Aye.
Ms. Frishy?
Nay.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer? Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
And Mr. Russell?
Abstain.
The ordinance is adopted.
First reading for ordinance 2023-75, an ordinance authorizing the mayor, service safety director, and/or city engineer of the city of Findlay, Ohio, to apply for and execute the necessary grant application or applications and agreement or agreements to receive grant funds from the Federal Highway Administration for the resurfacing of Bigelow Avenue from Main Street to Melrose Avenue, project number 328-33800, and declaring an emergency. First reading for ordinance 2023-76. An ordinance authorizing the mayor, service safety director, and/or city engineer of the city of Findlay, Ohio, to apply for and execute the necessary grant applications and agreement or agreements to receive grant funds from the Ohio Public Works Commission for a replacement water line on Moracle Boulevard from I-75 to Bliss Avenue, and declaring an emergency. First reading for ordinance 2023-77. An ordinance authorizing the mayor, service safety director, and/or city engineer of the city of Findlay, Ohio, to waive formal advertising and bidding and enter into contracts with Breathing Air Systems to purchase a SCBA fill station and compressor, utilizing the assistance to firefighters grant funds, appropriating and transferring funds thereto, and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Russell.
I move that council statutory rules be suspended and this ordinance be given its second and third reading.
Second, Mr. Palmer. All those in favor of the suspension of the rules say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Ms. Warnicki?
Aye.
Mr. Wobser?
Aye.
Mr. Ballman?
Aye.
Ms. Frishy?
Nay.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer?
Aye.
Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
And Mr. Slough?
Aye.
Rules of council have been suspended, and the clerk will give this ordinance its second and third reading.
Ordinance 2023-77, ordinance 2023-77.
Mr. Russell.
Move for adoption of ordinance 2023-077.
Second, Ms. Warnicki. Discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor of the ordinance say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Wobser?
Aye.
Mr. Ballman?
Aye.
Ms. Frishy?
Aye.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer? Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
And Ms. Warnicki?
Aye.
The ordinance is adopted.
First reading for ordinance 2023-78. An ordinance authorizing the mayor, service safety director, and/or city engineer of the city of Findlay, Ohio, to advertise for bids and enter into contracts to utilize the Community Development Block Grant Program for the design and construction of new park restrooms at Rawson Park and Swale Park, appropriating and transferring funds thereto, and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Palmer.
Since this is 100% paid for by a grant, I therefore move that council's statutory rules be suspended and this ordinance be given its second and third reading.
Second, Mr. Baumann. All those in favor of the suspension of the rules say aye after your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Ballman?
Aye.
Ms. Frishy?
Nay.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer?
Aye.
Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki?
Aye.
And Mr. Wobser?
Aye.
Rules of council have been suspended, and the clerk will give this ordinance its second and third reading.
Ordinance 2023-78. Ordinance 2023-78.
Mr. Baumann.
Move for adoption of ordinance number 2023-078.
Second, Mr. Palmer. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of the ordinance say aye after your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Ms. Frishy?
Aye.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer?
Aye.
Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki?
Aye.
Mr. Wobser?
Aye.
Mr. Ballman?
Aye.
The ordinance is adopted.
First reading for ordinance 2023-79, and ordinance authorizing the service safety director and the service director and the safety director of the city of Findlay, Ohio, to advertise for bids where required and enter into a contract or contracts for construction of various projects in accordance with the 2023 department equipment list, appropriating and transferring funds for said capital expenditures and declaring an emergency. First reading for ordinance 2023-80, an ordinance authorizing the mayor, service safety director, and/or city engineer of the city of Findlay, Ohio, to apply for funding through the Federal Aviation Administration Airport Improvement Programs, AIP 34 North Apron Rehab Reimbursement, and AIP 35 Rehab of Runway 725 Design, and enter into a grant agreement with the Federal Aviation Administration.
Mr. Russell.
Move the council statutory rules be suspended and ordinance 2023-080 be given its second and third reading.
Second, Mr. Hellman. All those in favor of suspension of the rules say aye after your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer?
Aye.
Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki?
Aye.
Mr. Wobser?
Aye.
Mr. Ballman?
Aye.
Ms. Frishy?
Nay.
Rules of council have been suspended, and the clerk will give this ordinance its second and third reading.
Ordinance 2023-80. Ordinance 2023-80.
Mr. Russell.
Move for adoption of ordinance 2023-080.
Second, Mr. Greeno. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of the ordinance say aye after your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer?
Aye.
Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki?
Aye.
Mr. Wobser?
Aye.
Mr. Ballman?
Aye.
Ms. Frishy?
Aye.
And Mr. Greeno.
Aye.
The ordinance is adopted.
First reading for ordinance 2023-81, an ordinance authorizing the service safety director of the city of Findlay, Ohio, to advertise for bids and enter into a lease agreement or agreements to farm approximately 181 acres in the vicinity of the airport, approximately 64 acres in the vicinity of the reservoirs, all owned by the city of Findlay, Ohio, and declaring an emergency. Add-on ordinance 2023-82, an ordinance appropriating funds and declaring an emergency.
Old business. Ms. Frishy.
I just want to go back to when we were having an ordinance discussion where the question got called in the middle of my discussion. I think it's very inappropriate when any member of council cuts somebody off when they're speaking on behalf of the public. I'm beginning to wonder that it might be something to do with me being a woman or being a woman that works for the public. So I would appreciate it going forward that we have better manners during council.
Wow. Any other old business? New business. I'm going to start. I'm sorry, Ms. Frishy. I've never, ever, I was taught my manners was to appreciate all, male, female, no matter what persuasion. I followed the HUD rules in all my business. For you to make a comment like that, I think was very inappropriate. Any other new business? Mr. Niemeyer.
I just I saw the mayor's hand up.
I'm sorry.
I
Mayor?
know I'm hidden over here. It's all right. I just wanted to say thank you for everybody's understanding the last couple of weeks with my family situation, and I really appreciate all the kind comments and notes that were sent. So thank you.
Other new? Hearing none, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Mr. Hellman, second Mr. Baumann. All those in favor of adjournment say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay.